And hello there, and welcome back on a nice lazy Monday afternoon. This is a short video. This is basically just a supplemental onto my operations class Odyssey. Basically, as and when I do refits to the ship's equipment, bridge officers or duty officers, I'm going to chart the evolution and just why I've done what I've done, just so that you can see how the ship's evolved over time. And there are a few little setting updates here and there, and without further ado, we'll go through them. One of the main things I'll say first of all is I've obviously been playing for some considerable time, and I realised that I was getting a little bit lazy in my power distribution levels, and what I've decided to do is I've got into the habit of actually swapping in about my power levels a little bit more, especially within combat. My equipment consoles have also changed a little bit, so my overall power levels are a little bit different from my last video. When I'm in combat, I've decided to throw more power into my shields and reduce my engines and auxiliary a little bit, but still very respectful. I'm getting 53 at 25 on auxiliary, 55 at 25 on engines, getting 73 out of 50 on my Mako Mark 11 shields, and obviously 123 on my weapons. It's just something I noticed that I was getting quite lazy recently in how my settings were set up, and sometimes I need to pump a little bit more power into my shields just to help them regenerate a little bit quicker, especially if I have things on cooldown. So I also to change my power level a little bit, change my presets just to help things along a little bit in different encounters, especially in the STFs. Now, if you look at my bridge officer configuration, you'll notice that a little bit of a change, nothing major. I've actually dropped the Ensign Universal from polarised to hull to emergency power to engines, and I'll come into that in a moment as to why. I've actually got 3 officers that I'm now swapping in and out of that ensign slot depending on what I need, and it's either one of 2 engineers, which this one has emergency power to engines. I've also got one for emergency power to weapons 1, and then my other one is a science bridge officer that's got polarised to hull occasionally when I do really need it. I'll go into why in a few moments, but one little change on my bridge officer layout a little bit. Now, to explain why I've done that, I've retreat, if I get the words out today, not being tongue-tied, my space officers, and as you can see here, things are a little bit more different now. I've got all-purpose bar 1, which as soon as I see a decent deal on the exchange, I'm going to pick up a purple damage control engineer. The reason I've done this is my con officer hasn't changed. She's given me a reduction in tactical team, so giving me a reduction by 8 seconds. Tactical team is just really beneficial. It's one of those abilities that I keep in there. Now, what I've done is I've now slotted in a purple warp core engineer. It's basically a 20% chance to increase all power levels by 25. So that's either my weapons, shields, engines and auxiliary. If this 20% chance kicks in, it will increase the power levels by 25 on all of them, which I thought was actually quite useful for this ship, as I do like to run a higher power level. And obviously, especially for engines, for example, the more power you got in your engines, the more manoeuvrable the ship's going to be, but also vice versa. The more power I got in the auxiliary, the more abilities, my science abilities are going to work much more effectively, such as transfer shield strength. Hazard emitters are going to get a bonus from a more increased power level to auxiliary, and also things like structure and technical field 3, so auxiliary to that also increases the ability as well. So I decided to slide the warp core engineer there, as a 20% chance, so it doesn't trip all the time. However, I now put in 3 damage control engineers, 2 of which have got a 35% chance of reducing the recharge time by 30% on any emergency power ability, and the blue one's got a 30% chance of reducing reduction time by 30%. It's not too much of a drop down. This basically means I can actually cycle through 2 emergency powers very, very quickly now, and what I can do is I can actually alternate between the 2. Now, some people might say, well, what about if you need to boost your shield power? Well, that's why I've got transfer shield strength, and I've also got shield batteries, and I've also got the enhanced plasma manifold console that if I want to trip that will increase my shield regeneration rate as well. So this particular build on this Odyssey, and it's slightly different on my Ambassador class, which will be a future video later on, is it basically means that I can alternate between the two to get them in quite quickly. So if I trip emergency power to shields 3, that automatically puts emergency power to engines on the 15-second cooldown. But also there's a chance of at least 3 different 35%, 35% chances and a 30% chance of reduction in recharge time by 30%. So already I can now trip emergency power to engines. That's reduced cooldown now to 15 seconds on emergency power to shields, but also you'll notice my power levels have got a bonus. I've got that plus 25 from the warp core engineer. Now that ability doesn't stay there for too long, but it can make all the difference, especially if tripped correctly. So I could just do emergency powered shields, and unfortunately it's not tripped here, but in the interim, with the auxiliary power level then shooting up, if the warp core engineer kicks in, I can then hit emergency powered structure integrity field 3, which then gives me an extra kinetic resistance as well. So it's just something quite useful to bear in mind. So, as I said, it doesn't trip all the time, but it's another way of getting power and increasing my abilities on my ship. So I alternate between the two. Sometimes I'll catch it and there's actually 15 seconds on the cooldown, so if I trip emergency powered shields 3 in a moment, then actually just catching it on the 15-second mark. So you can see now my abilities, power levels on auxiliary's gone up. My auxiliary power ability, for example, is also increasing the amount of hit points it will heal. Now if I leave the cursor over there, as the power level drops, you can see how the auxiliary power affects quite a few abilities there. So as I said, I've been alternating between the two. Now combine this with EPS transfer 3 and the enhanced plasma manifold, I can run pretty much decent high power levels to all subsystems, so it becomes very beneficial in its own right. More power I've got going to my weapons, for example. If I get the bonus, the warp core engineer bonus trips in, then I'm keeping my power levels up on my weapons, I'm getting better DPS. I run the Mako shields on this ship, and as such I get the power conduit, so there's more received damage. There's a stacking ability to give the +1 to your more energy system, so if I bring it out quickly. And the Mako shields, there's obviously the power conduit, so it's +2 to all power settings for 15 seconds, and that stacks. So as you can see, I'm starting to increase my power levels more and more and more. Now you see the warp core engineers kicked in again. By using structural integrity of 3, I'm actually getting better resistance out of it. So what I've done is I've kind of dropped one resistance for another in some respects, I suppose you could look at it that way. Now that's the duty officer change, and then one of the other things I've now changed is the ship's equipment. Equipment's actually changed out a little bit now, and depending on what I'm doing, the equipment will change around a little bit. I still have my Harping torpedo that I do use from time to time still, but what I've done is my second forward torpedo launcher has now changed to the Omega plasma torpedo launcher, which is gainable through the Orb reputation system. And by slotting this in, the torpedo itself is actually quite respectful. Basically it holds 5 torpedo charges, and you basically launch all 5 of these off, and then you're looking at my current configuration and how my skill. You're at 1718 kinetic damage or 3436 DPS. But note, this torpedo is effective against something that's unshielded. So if you're up against a ship that's got its full shields up and you launch this torpedo, you're not going to get as much benefit, although you will obviously get the plasma fire proc that kicks in. However, where this torpedo really scores is if you're launching at static targets. If you're launching at a gateway or a nanite probe in one of the Borg SCFs, you can use high yield torpedo, which will affect this torpedo, and then you get quite some devastating torpedo there that actually hits its target. And obviously you don't get to fire 6 of them, but you only get to fire 1 torpedo, but this has been really effective against a stationary target, and you've also got the option for plasma damage every 1 second for 15 seconds as well. Now, as I said, stationary target, this torpedo is brilliant. When I high yield it, if I'm up against something that's more close, like a normal ship, then I will normally just favour running the Omega torpedo not high yielded or torpedo salvoed. I've got 5 shots there that I can fire off in quick rapid succession, and when it's in the mode that it's in at the moment, it's actually undestroyable. However, if I overload the plasma torpedo, and note it doesn't actually do plasma damage, it actually does kinetic damage, but yeah, it's really good for stationary targets, or even a target you know you've got to put drop on. But when you use it high yielded, the torpedo is destroyable, and it's a destructible projectile at that point, and with current patches the way things have gone, I've noticed ball ships are able to shoot down AoE effect weapons much more effectively, so bear that in mind and keep an eye out for it. So yeah, pick it wisely when you want to use it, really. I know a lot of people have favoured the ball cutting beam. I found it's not really beneficial for me. I don't think it works for me in this ship's current configuration and my playstyle, running the 2 torpedoes forward and 1 aft with the rest beam arrays. I found this torpedo actually more effective. Now, something to note is that the Omega Plasma Torpedo Launcher and the old Borg Universal Assembly Console are now part of the same set. There's a third one that goes with it as well, which is the cutting beam, that I won't be using on this ship. But you also get a bonus now, because I'm getting a 2-part bonus. Now, the 2-part bonus I get is not actually too bad. It's the Omega Weapon Amplification, and I preferred this one because this is kind of affects beam weapons, but basically it's a 2.5% chance to apply the Omega Weapon Amplifier, so basically a +10 to my current weapon power, and then a resistance rating to that weapons as well. So it acts very similar to Nadion Inversion and the Direct Energy Modulation duty officer. You get the Systems Engineer that gives you the 8 seconds plus 200 resistance to the weapons energy drain. So quite useful. I haven't quite worked the figures out on how often it proc actually kicks in, but I have noticed things do seem to be better on my beam arrays. Now, you could bonus this is for energy weapons, but I haven't reached tier 5 on the Omega and the Romulan reputation, on the Omega reputation system. At the tier 4 choosable option, what you could do, I mean, I went for a superior shield repair mainly because I'm a cruiser. However, if I was attack or I wanted extra damage, I might have gone for the Graviton Amplifier and then used 2-part of the Borg console set, and that would have given me the Graviton Amplifier. This one affects kinetic damage with torpedoes and mines, and the other you get from the set piece affects energy weapons. So you're getting quite an oomph to your weapon systems there. It depends on playstyle and how you want to do it. But yeah, that's one of the first changes that's obviously kicked into effect. Now, my bridge officer layout, my console layout has also changed a little bit, and I'm in the process of picking up Mark 12 consoles at the moment, just because I've been quite lucky on the exchange. And what I've done is I'm now running a Monotronium Mark 12 for +40 kinetic damage. I came to the conclusion that I wanted to beef up what damage this cruiser could take, and I noticed in STF sometimes I would get occasionally caught out by the Invisible Torpedo, which is pretty much undefendable against, but you can certainly enhance your abilities for protection. So in the end I thought, well, damage for kinetic damage is going to be quite useful, especially for those rare occasions. Not rare, they do happen, but the occasions when your shield quarter gets dropped, someone gets a couple of high yields in. By having the +40 kinetic damage resistance base at the start, that's given me a pretty decent defense. I mean, currently I am looking at my kinetic resistances before any other buffs are kicked in. I'm looking at a 36.7, so that's pretty not bad at all, really. And obviously if I just kick off structure integrity normally, obviously you start seeing where things, the polar as a whole would also increase this, but you could also just brace for impact, and then you're looking at a 64.9% resistance there for kinetic damage. So really useful that, and heck, you can even kick in Omega as well for the extra protection. Now, my other armour console is swapping in and out a lot depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing standard PvE, I tend to just favour the ablative hull armour, because Plasma Disruptor, Phaser Disruptor, Plasma and Tetron are pretty much the most common weapon types that you're going to come across. Now, there are exceptions to this, and the Podaron weapons, for example. If I was coming across that, or just in PvP, what I'd probably tend to do is I may swap out my ablative and actually slot in my Neutronium alloy, which again would give me a bonus to my kinetic resistance, and then would just give me a generic resistance to all my energy weapon types as well. So I swap in and out of those semi-frequently. Now, moving on to what else has changed, I'm obviously still using my enhanced plasma, and I find that quite useful. For the time being, I've dropped my Jovenite ablative hardpoints. I'm just not using them at the moment. It's so rare for me to actually use them that I've actually put them back into my inventory. What I've done is I've now slotted in a set of auxiliary batteries just for those occasions where I need them, or I just need to boost my auxiliary power levels. So now I'm running the shield battery, weapon battery, and auxiliary battery, and obviously substrate module you get from missions is still slotted. Moving back onto the console, sorry, I digressed back to engineering. If I'm not running the ablative but I'm in an STF, what I will now run is my Mark 12 electroceramic hull, which gives me the plus 40 plasma and 40 tetron. When you're in the STFs, the most common damage type you're up against is either kinetic or plasma damage. And so what I did was I just been biding my time waiting for a good deal on the exchange, and I happened to spot a few consoles recently that have been really good on the exchange at a reasonable price, and I basically grabbed the electroceramic Mark 12. So now if I'm in STS, I'll slot this in, and obviously I get by default, before any butter applied, I'm getting the 36.7 on my kinetic, and then my plasma resists, I'm looking at 36.7 as well. So the key types of energy that I'm up against, my hull's going to be hit by, I've got some pretty decent defense against them. Now, one new addition to my other engineering console slots is also the RCS accelerator. I happen to spot again a very good deal for a Mark 12. I picked this up and this gives me the plus 40% flight turn rate. So this means that the Odyssey is now turning a lot nicer and making her a little bit more pointable. I've never had too many complaints. I've found ways to get the Odyssey to turn quite nicely, but just occasionally I did wish that she'd turn just a little bit more different. So in the combination with my duty officers now, with 3 options now for reducing the recharge time for emergency powered subsystems, it means that I can actually now run 2 lots of something. Now, because I do pretty successfully without having to have 2 copies of emergency powered shields, it's now meant that that ensign slot has become universal again in what I wanted to run. So maybe in the elites I might actually slot in the polarized hull, but I don't think I will be now. What I will be doing is probably just using either emergency power to engines 1 or emergency power to weapons 1, either one beneficial. If engines is going to help the ship turn quicker, especially with the RCS console, and emergency power to dampers. And then obviously if I get the warp core engineer bonus kicks in, I get a bonus to my auxiliary power level, or I can pump a battery or use the enhanced plasma manifold, then hit emergency dampers. It's going to increase the effectiveness of how that works. So you're starting to see where I'm starting to make the ship a bit more manoeuvrable, and she's certainly becoming a bit more, she already is versatile, but she's becoming even more versatile. And this alternation between engines and weapons on the ensign slot, I think is going to change quite frequently depending on what I'm up against. And if I really do if I want to slot in beam overload and I want to use that, then I probably will have emergency power to engines. Excuse me. So yeah, a few enhancements kicking in. That's not the only thing to have changed. Our embassy in our fleet has just got to the stage where we've got the Purple Mark 10 access to the new science consoles, and we're not going to be too far off before we get the Mark 11 purples as well. But I was keen to give these a go because the Mark 10s are the equivalent of Mark 11s. They get decent specs, so they're a little bit more powered than standard science consoles. Now this one's a little bit special, as you get other abilities that kick in with it as well. Now this one is one of the consoles that actually generates threat. And as any of them have seen my previous videos, they'll be aware that I've only actually got 3 skill points spec'd into threat control, and sometimes obviously I need to hold aggro a bit more regularly. So what I decided to do is I grabbed one of these consoles to increase my threat generation. Now the reason for that is obviously I'm going to take more incoming fire, so I'm going to get a bit more of a bonus in my resistances, hence why I took threat control. But the other thing to bear in mind is the more firepower my shields that they're being hit with, the more conduit links going to stack, and as such the more conduit link stacks, the more +2 power levels are going to increase. So it's kind of a twofold thing. Yes, I'm drawing aggro and keeping it off of escorts and science vessels, but it also means my own power levels are increasing, which means basically for the damage targets are doing to my ship, I'm actually getting bonus to my power levels, which is actually making my powers work better because the power levels are higher. So definitely a little worthwhile little console. These science ones have been quite impressed with. I mean, that's just part of what they can do, and part of the reason why I've done my build the way I've done. So not only am I obviously getting the increased threat generation, this console is actually in the emitter array, so I'm getting a plus 28.1 to my shield emitters, which for those that don't remember, if we just bring up the old science area for skill points and science emitters, basically that improves all your shield repair and healing abilities, so things like science team, transfer shield strength, for example, rotate shield frequency. The more points you want here, the greater those abilities are going to work, for example. It's not to be confused with the Starship Shield system. The Starship Shield system is the one that gives you hit points in the shields. The Starship Shield emitters helps your healing abilities. So always worth bearing in mind that. And the last little thing you get from this console, which is very useful as well, is a 2.5% chance to restore the ship's hull by plus 750.4 hull over a 10-second cooldown period. So basically I'm kind of getting a little bit of a stealth heal to my hull as well. So I've not worked out how frequently that proc's kicking in, to be perfectly honest. It's rare for my hull to go down. It's not uncommon though. I recently did a STF where my shields were down and I got hit by a couple of heavy torpedoes and one STF that actually brought my hull quite seriously down. Miracle worker got me out of the frying pan, which just made me remind myself to keep paying more attention. It was still very, very useful. So it did actually kick in and actually gave me a bit of a hull heal at the same time. So it's kind of like a mini version of the multi-power structure integrity field. One way of looking at it really in that respect. Now, as I said, consoles got slightly swapped over, and one of the consoles that's now gone back into regular service is my Mark 12 shield emitter amplifier, which is the plus 15% shield regeneration rate. So currently I'm looking at my shields, I'm getting regeneration at 224.1 shield regeneration every 6 seconds. So combine that with multi-powered shields, transfer shield strength, just shields in general, my shields are increasing much quicker. Something to note is, as I said already, I've made tier 5 Omega and running a reputation system, and the space ability you get at tier 5 is the quantum singularity manipulation, which is basically an increase to all my science stats by 100 for 8 seconds. So I have to admit I've not popped to this yet, it just might reach in tier 5, but that's going to boost up all my science abilities, so things like transfer shield strength, hazard emitters, I get quite a bonus when I use that. So yeah, that's giving me a pretty decent shield regeneration rate, and that's not including my passives, which I'll just go into at the moment. These are just the other ones. So in my options of choice from running rep and Omega rep, I've now got emergency secondary shielding, so it's an instant heal to my shields. If I get it's a 20% chance to kick in when I'm critically hit in space combat. So it kind of happens more than every 10 seconds, but it's still 1,800 shields per unit per shield facing it when it's critically hit. So quite useful, that one. And then I've got the enhanced shield system, which basically increases my Starship Shield system skill by 30. Again, anything that increases my shield healing abilities I'm going to take. I've even got the hull repairing nanites, which regenerates 10% of your hull every 60 seconds in space combat. Again, nothing to really be sneezing at, again, really. And that's my ground skills, and I've actually got to increase your shield regeneration rate at 301.9 shield regeneration every 6 seconds as well. So the ship's got a combination of hull and shield healing abilities, passive abilities that are kicking in, quite useful. So for those that wonder what choices I made, these are the choices I made for the Omega reputation system, medical nanites for my health, and then went for tier 2, the hull repair and nanites. Tier 3, despite having the built-in frequency modulator from the Mako ground set, I opted just to have the rotating weapon frequency so that the ball don't adapt to my system and my weapons so quickly. I didn't go for the graviton amplifier. I have contemplated between the two of these because theoretically I've probably got a decent amount of shield regeneration coming in, so I could probably drop superior shield repair. However, I like having that extra bit of defense, so I went for it. And then the tier 5, which is the medical nanite cloud, that's actually a ground clickable ability with a 10-minute cooldown. And in the Romulan side of things, once I got to tier 5, tier 1 I obviously grabbed the enhanced personal shields. Tier 2 I grabbed the enhanced shield systems, like increasing my shield system skills by 30. Tier 3 I went for the reactive shielding, which is a ground ability to heal my shields. Tier 4 I opted for the emergency secondary shielding. If I was attack or a psi, I probably would have gone for the sense of targeting assault, but by doing that it means I kind of lose aggro, and I want to keep aggro, so if I'm going to keep aggro I might as well go for the emergency secondary shielding. And then obviously at tier 5 the only choice is the quantum singularity manipulation that my character got to. So yeah, that's pretty much a quick run through of the ship, and just showing you what's changed a little bit. Ship's performing very admirably. I've got no complaints whatsoever. It's working for me. It's a little bit slower combat than some people might be used to, but yeah, really successful to me. So I hope that helps everyone. As I said, it's just how my ship's built and how she's evolving over time, really. And as I said, as and when things change around a little bit, I'll update them as well. I've got to finish up my Klingon series, which I haven't released yet, and then I think I will most likely do the Ambassador class yet. I haven't decided yet, but yeah, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of how things have changed a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed it. Comments and criticisms are always welcome, as long as they're not just moans. So yeah, thanks a lot, and look forward to speaking to you all again in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.